I'm live. This is the first live that I'm doing on my backup account. I started doing lives on my main account 2 days ago, and I'm going to do another live over on my main Progress Permaculture account at 5 p.m. Pacific, but I thought I would take half an hour here and talk about a subject that I got a lot of requests to discuss, which is the fact that our family are unschoolers, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions around unschooling. So I thought I would take this space. I know I didn't pre-advertise it, but I thought I would take this space to discuss that subject for a little bit and also answer any side questions that people have. So my children are 23, 21, 17, and 14. We are unschoolers, and my husband is a public school teacher. So that seems like a little bit of a conflict for people. A lot of people don't understand what unschooling is. And then a lot of people don't understand how we could be lifelong homeschoolers, but also support public education. So I thought I would discuss that for a little bit. For people who are not aware, unschooling is kind of a niche educational philosophy. It's very much designed around a child's natural curiosity and natural desire for learning. And the emphasis is not on crushing our kids' natural desire for learning, but instead nurturing it so that they become self-directed learners. They're able to learn about everything that they need. They're able to acquire knowledge and skills, and not just about particular subjects, but also about study habits and things like that. They acquire all of that through their own interests, and parents serve as a guide or a facilitator. They're not a teacher or dictating subjects. So for an unschooling family, you don't have a curriculum that you choose unless your child wants a curriculum. Unless your kid would like to do that, then you go ahead and do that, because it's all about listening to your children and leaning into their interests. So we decided to become unschoolers. Gosh, I want to say before I ever had children, I was interested in the subject of unschooling. But initially, I have a minor in elementary education. My husband is a special education teacher at a public school. I was interested in maybe more like Charlotte Mason or Montessori. Those were educational philosophies that really interested me. So when I had kids, and my eldest child, who later was diagnosed with autism, and she learned to read before she was 3. She taught herself to read. She was absolutely hyperlexic. And when I tried to think about following the Charlotte Mason method and using that kind of literature, she balked at that immediately. She didn't want formal lessons for math, even though we were using like Cuisinart rods. And I was very interested in child-directed learning to an extent, but I still had all of this kind of indoctrination from my minor in education that said, well, I need to have a set curriculum or my kid can't learn. And she was not having it. So we became unschoolers because that's what my youngest child wanted, what worked for her. So basically I allowed her to do whatever she wanted. She gave me feedback on what worked for her and what didn't. Because she was already a very quick reader, she acquired math skills very quickly. And she spent a lot of her time reading and doing art. And then we joined a local homeschool co-op so that she could do things like take drama classes or craft classes, some science experiment classes. I taught a class at that co-op called Blood and Guts. It was basically a supermarket anatomy class. We dissected, beef heart and a rabbit and things like that. I have children here. Are you going?
Oh,
Speaking of, I'm just doing a live. Have fun.
Should I join?
No, are you gonna go?
In like an hour.
Oh, well, we're talking about unschooling. So if you want to join, this is my eldest. This is Ruth.
Hello.
She's going to a party in a little bit.
I'm waiting for Murray to call. So.
Okay, we were talking about unschooling. Do you have any insight? I was talking about how like you were not interested in a formal education, in a curriculum, and you tended to be pretty antagonistic to that idea.
Yeah, I think we had neighbor kids growing up who went to public school, and I just didn't feel like I would really get anything out of the experience they were doing. They weren't really learning. They were like very antagonistic towards their own education.
Can you be a little bit louder?
Yeah, they weren't really, from what they told me, they weren't really learning much. They were very antagonistic towards their own education. They were extremely resentful and spiteful of going to school.
Of busy work, or what do you mean? Can you elaborate?
Well, of the homework and of their teachers, and social aspect was really toxic. Like, they would say there was a lot of bullying and a lot of really just, like, unfair, unjust situations that they couldn't do anything about.
And that really resonated with you because you have a really strong sense of justice, and also you've had a lot of autonomy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt like they, like, the friends I had that went to public school, they weren't learning any of the things I was interested in. Like, I was really interested in, like, science and nature and ecology, and they were like, yeah, we don't really learn much of that in school. At least the topics I was interested in. And, like, they would constantly complain about how they had no free time to do the things they were actually interested in because they were so busy with homework. And I just didn't really want to.
And I know you've talked about, so y'all have talked about kind of the peer stratification of public school, and you didn't have that in the homeschool community, like the freedom to have relationships with people who weren't born, like, in your exact age group. Yeah,
they had this really weird thing where, like, you couldn't be friends with someone who was a different age than you, even, like, less than 1 year age difference. They thought it was weird, and I thought it was weird that they thought it was weird. Even to this day, friends in college, like, I'll tell them about homeschool parties I went to and how they had, like, a wide age range. They'd be like, that's so weird. Why would you have friends that are different ages than you?
Because one of your closest friends growing up was one of our neighbors he's almost 2 years younger than you, right? But you had a lot of common interests, especially in terms of literature, right?
Yeah, we had
art.
Yeah, we had a lot of the same interests, and even just, I was like, but your siblings are different ages than you. Like, I don't see how it's weird. You're not dating these people. You're just friends with them.
Yeah.
And they would be like, well, it's about what grade you're in. Not even age, it's about what grade you're in. So, like, if someone was held back or moved forward a grade, then still they would think it's weird to be friends with people outside of your grade. It was less weird for them to be friends with someone who was older than someone who was younger. But they thought it was really weird to be friends with someone who was younger. Even to this day, my two best friends are almost 3 years older than me and almost 3 years younger than me, and I just don't think it's weird.
Yeah. I was going to talk a little bit about your siblings because they had such a different experience, because kids number 2 and 3 are dyslexic, and so unschooling has worked particularly well for them. Their educational support needs have really been met better at home. But can I just talk to you for a second, Ruth, since you're here, before you go hang out with your friends? In terms of the rules of public school, right? Like, our family's pretty anti-authoritarian. We're kind of opposed to rules in general, right? And I know one of the things that, as you guys got older, maybe this is more B than you, but you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is the whole notion of public school. You don't have control over your schedule, over what subjects you learn. You don't have control over who you're interacting with. You don't have control over your own body, right? Like, the idea that you have to ask permission to go to the bathroom, and you're not given agency over your own body. You're told you have to eat at this time of day, whether or not that's when you're hungry, is another element of it that I think you guys were sort of exempt from being unschooled.
Yeah, some things that I found out when I was a kid that I did not like the idea of. I don't know what level they do this.
Hi, thanks, Genevieve.
In, like, kindergarten or preschool, but you had to take naps at a certain time. Even some homeschoolers who do that, like, you have to nap at this time. Like, well, I can't, so.
You stopped napping when you were 3, so.
Yeah, I never really napped when I was little. I can nap now because I'm tired all the time, but. Another thing was, I found out you had to pay for lunch. I thought that was ridiculous, especially because it wasn't a very good lunch, and you had to be there. I didn't want to do that.
Well, and unlike public schools in places like Korea and stuff, in America, public school lunches are the lowest bidder, so the food is very poor quality at most schools.
Yeah, and my friends who went to public school would complain about that. Another thing, having to use the bathroom, not being allowed to use the bathroom, I was really opposed to that. Even when I did college classes when I was 16, they weren't necessarily, like, high school level classes. Like, all of my classmates were adults, but in one of them, and this was probably just Mount Hood is different than PCC and OSU, you still had to ask to use the bathroom, and there would be certain classes like, oh, we have a quiz this week, so you're not allowed to use the bathroom. Why? Why? What am I gonna, do I have the answers to all of the problems written down in the bathroom and I'm gonna look at them? Like, I didn't even have a phone.
Could we talk about that for a second? I think, because people want to know, like, what are the downsides to unschooling? And I think some of the downsides are, there's the opportunity for educational neglect that can happen. It does happen. I don't want to make it sound like unschooling is different than other forms of homeschooling. Educational neglect can and absolutely does happen in this community. But I think another one for kids who do get a really good, rich, diverse education is that you're not used to following rules and you're used to being self-directed. And so I know you and some of your other siblings have struggled when you step into a formal school environment where there are suddenly these games you have to play and these rules and these hoops you have to jump through that are really arbitrary and often unjust. Like, you have correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you all have had very low tolerance for bullshit and for rules for rules' sake that don't make sense and don't serve a purpose. Maybe you could, if you're willing, expand on that a little.
Yeah, I guess I kind of had to get used to that in college because I wasn't used to it. I feel like in some ways being homeschooled gave me a leg up in college because college is much more self-directed than high school. And I was already pretty used to being self-directed. Like, I would still have to pass, in my childhood, the, like, state standard exams.
In Oregon, can I interrupt you for a second? For people who don't know, every single state in the U.S. has different requirements for homeschoolers. In Oregon, kids have to pass standardized tests at certain grade levels. I think, 5th, 8th, and 11th grade. You only have to score in the 15th percentile to pass, but it's still like a standardized test that a hoop you have to jump through. Yeah,
so basically, I still had to pass those exams that my friends in public school had to pass around the same time as me. And I would see how they had no free time to do anything, and they still scored around the same as me. I think I scored the 87th percentile or I scored an 87 on the exam. I don't know.
You got it in the 90, I think, like in the 95th percentile. Okay. So your outright score, I think, was 80 something.
I think my outright, I just remember the number.
But that was the first time you ever took a standardized test.
Yeah, that was the first one. I was 10, I remember. And then there was a couple after that. But I just remember I did better than several of my friends who were going to public school. And I just studied myself. Like, I didn't have to spend like 10 hours on school and homework every single day in order to pass them. So I remember thinking it must be extremely inefficient to learn these subjects in school if I was able to teach them to myself. And I have found that to be very, very true in college. A lot of classes teach things very, very, very inefficiently. And so I find that I can teach it to myself by using the textbook or just online tutorials. That's
a big concept for unschoolers, right? Is helping your children learn to be autodidacts so that they are able to take charge of their own learning and they don't have to be passive recipients. They don't have to sit and be lectured to. It's how we learn. It's how human beings learned before school and in societies that don't have formal industrialized education, but it's also how we learn as adults, right? If I want to learn about something, I just go and teach myself about it. I go find resources, or I practice a skill, or I go and join a club or take a class, right? So I don't have to sit and wait for somebody to come to me and say, now is the time that you need to learn how to knit, or now is the time that you are going to learn this skill and I'm going to teach it to you.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like more of an issue now with people not knowing how to teach themselves things, even though we have the internet. I think generative AI is part of this. A lot of people jokingly call them online secondhand thinkers, who it is so easy to teach yourself things right now, but they just want it to be spoon-fed to them. People do this even before generative AI was a thing, people do this on social media. They'll be like, someone tell me this, when it's something you can easily look up yourself.
I get that a lot in my comments. I wish you would have explained this better. And I'm like, well, this is just something that if you don't already know it, I guess I try not to be negative to my audience, but I try not to be too scoldy. And so I'll say like, you're actually really capable, right? One of the things that I think being an unschooling parent has taught me is that children are far more capable than we give them credit for. And like adults are too. We are all, we all should be able to trust ourselves to be able to reach out and research and figure things out on our own. We don't have to sit and wait to be spoon-fed.
That's the thing. Children are very capable of teaching themselves things. They just oftentimes are not motivated to, or they are given very little incentive to. I mean, like, one of my little brothers, when he was like 12 or 11, was like programming Minecraft mods and using Blender just because he was on YouTube and teaching himself. But I felt like my friends that went to public school growing up around me, they just like seemed like they were given extremely little incentive to learn about stuff.
Well, don't you think that's something with unschooling is the trying not to crush kids' natural motivation to want to learn? And so I think a lot of people feel that if you don't give your kids formal subjects, they're never going to learn these concepts. But I think that I found the opposite to be true. When you try and force children to learn, when it's not contextualized in their real life, or they have no passion, or they don't understand, like, why should I be learning about this thing? They'll learn it for the test and then they'll just dump it, right? I did a lot of that in school growing up. Okay, I'm going to learn this for the test. I don't see how this is going to serve any purpose in my real life. I don't enjoy this subject. I just got to grind out that A and move on. But for unschooling, you want kids to learn things and then retain them. And I think that's one of the reasons that unschooling kids will often get really into a subject, and they may be really behind on one subject, right? Because they've been fascinated with some other topic. But then suddenly their interest pivots. For example, George wanting to learn, when he was 5, wanting to learn multiplication and how squares work. And all of a sudden in like 2 days, he's memorized all his times tables. He used Minecraft to build, are you texting your girlfriend? He used Minecraft to build all kinds of structures and taught himself multiplication in just a couple of days because he was really invested in it and he wanted to learn it so that he could do something he cared about, which was do these Minecraft battles, right? So as soon as it's contextualized in your real life, you can learn it much more quickly and retain it much better. I'm gonna yap because Ruth's texting her girlfriend. So,
Sauce, I gotta go.
Okay. Thanks for chatting with us. Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts about unschooling before I just yap about it for a little bit more?
I can't think of anything I didn't say in the last live stream about how I feel like the internet is really warping people's perception of it.
Maybe I'll talk about that after you leave. How people don't know what unschooling is. Yeah.
Like there are problems with it, but I feel like people almost like don't really know what the actual problems are because most people are only exposed to homeschooling and unschooling through like
fundy homeschooling.
Through a couple like news channels covers of specific families that I've seen online.
Radical unschoolers, yeah.
But then also now on TikTok and YouTube, there's been a couple people who are clearly like rage baiting. But I don't know. I gotta do it.
Okay, have fun.
But
peace out.
Toodles.
Okay. Yeah. So for sorry, I'm getting a notification. Okay. Is Minecraft's graphics heavy or light? I don't play Minecraft. Minecraft, I think, is basically just like 3D virtual Legos, essentially. It's building blocks. There is quite a bit of programming. My 14-year-old doesn't appear on social media or like do anything like this. He would have to explain it far better than me. He uses all of the behind the scenes programming. Bedrock? I'm going to get the name wrong. To be able to manipulate a lot of things in Minecraft. So it's graphics heavy, but it's all blocks, I think. Sorry that was a really clumsy way to answer that question. I think that's also something about unschooling is that it's our kids' interests and what they're passionate about. A lot of homeschoolers, especially in fundy homeschooling, it's like, oh, the mom wants all the kids to learn violin, or like this is the thing that we do as a family. And there's also a lot of, especially in larger families, just economy of scale, right? All of my kids are going to learn about this at the same time. We're all going to use the same curriculum because they're really tired. Moms are really tired. Homeschooling is really exhausting. And so there's a lot of just simplification out of necessity in a way that that doesn't honor the children's interests. And for me, all 4 of my kids are incredibly, incredibly different. I've had very different interests and very different pathways. So Ruth, entirely unschooled. She took 1 class at the community college when she was 16 to test it out. But then she didn't take any formal education at all until she got her GED and started college when she was 19. Her other sister wants to be an attorney, very, very active in a local homeschool group that had a mock trial team. Her team is mock trial. They were state champions when she was a captain. Really, really involved in taking all kinds of classes on Supreme Court case history and anything to do with anything legal. Just very, very different. Ruth, all art, lots of reading, lots of painting, lots of drawing. Give her anything to do with constitutional law and case history. She went on to work for a nonprofit here in Portland. She doesn't anymore, that did legal advocacy for the homeless community here. So very, very different people. My 3rd kid, he's a big history buff. He could watch BreadTube all day. He spends a lot of his time playing D&D with his friends. He spends a lot of time going for long walks, and he goes to Magic the Gathering Club, and just very, very different. My youngest kid, also super different, loves Minecraft. He loves to game online with his friends, hang out with his friends at the park. So when you have unschooling, I think parents, or not parents necessarily, but the greater society may have this false perception that unschooling is lazy parenting, or it's unparenting and it's less work than regular homeschooling. I would say it's far more work to have a really invested relationship with your kids. We're like, oh, this is actually what my kid is into, and I need to prioritize this and make time and help them chase their passion down the rabbit hole, or even just try something new, right? My kids will often try something and then say, you know what? Now that I'm into this, this is not for me after all. This is not my thing. So George played futsal, and then no. Both my daughters played roller derby for a while, and then no, they don't want to do that anymore. And I think helping kids understand that it's okay to try something and decide that you enjoy it for a while, for a season, or maybe you don't enjoy it at all, and to move on, versus like, this is a thing we do in this family. One other example is that I'm very musical. So I play the piano. I have a hammered dulcimer. I play hammered dulcimer in school. I was a band kid, and I played French horn, and I played piano and trumpet in jazz band. I played the guitar. My kids have 0 interest in music. 2 of my kids are really tone deaf. We had a piano, we have a guitar. If we had been kind of a more traditional homeschooling family, I would have made sure my kids learned music, and they just had no interest. They would much rather do visual arts instead. And so I let them chase that passion, even though I would have loved to have had a musical family. It's just not how things turned out. So it's not what we did. I think parenting is harder when they get to be an adult. Oh, my son loves D&D as well. Yeah, our whole family really likes D&D. In some of my videos, I wear Critical Role shirts. My husband gets me a lot of Critical Role shirts. I think that parenting, so far for me, having 2 adult kids, 23 and 21, this is the best part of parenting for me. I think it's really exciting to see them get to be their authentic selves and to get to see them have their own ideas. And it definitely is much more of a friendship relationship. And I think that transition has been easier for us because we have this sort of non-authoritarian relationship. We don't do punishments. We don't do obedience. So I've never had this kind of hierarchical relationship with my kids. That makes the transition, I think, for our family easier when it involves moving from teenagehood to adulthood. Yeah, I'm sorry, my tummy's growling. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm really hungry. I'm doing dinner after this. I think my husband's going to cook dinner. So that's sort of a little bit of let me actually diverge for a second and talk about special ed and unschooling. Because people say, how do your kids get special ed support services if you don't use the public school? And it's different in every single state. But in Oregon, your homeschooled or unschooled kid has a right to access services at the public school. Not just special education services, but they can also join like orchestra or the band, or they can do sports. They're absolutely allowed to do that. So my second kid, she was 7 years old and still not reading proficiently. And since Ruth taught herself to read like basically a little bit before 3 and I did nothing, I was really stymied because B was really verbal. She was clearly really, really intelligent. She just struggled to pronounce really simple words. And again, my husband's a teacher. I have a minor in elementary ed. I was like, there is something going on here. I'm not qualified to diagnose it, but I have a hint. So my parents came to visit from Florida, and my dad was profoundly dyslexic. He watched B try and read a book to him, and he was like, oh, she's totally got dyslexia. Like 100%. He's like, that is my entire childhood right there. So we went and took her to the local public school. She met with the school psychologist. She did the whole evaluation, all of the battery of tests. At the time in Oregon, dyslexia was not acknowledged as a learning disability. So you couldn't have a diagnosis of dyslexia and qualify for SPED services. So they categorized it as special reading disability, I think was the classification, but her formal diagnosis is dyslexia. She went to the local elementary school's reading lab for about 2 months. We would walk her down. She'd go every day, and we were hopeful that this will help. Maybe they're going to use an Orton-Gillingham method, something. It was a disaster, and we pulled her out. The reading room specialist was using really antiquated ideas. Again, this is more than 15 years ago. She didn't have any training in dyslexia whatsoever, and I knew they should be using Orton-Gillingham curricula, something like Explode the Code, to help her learn how to read. And instead, she suggested that B get different colored lenses in her glasses, and like tinted lenses or something, and that might cure her dyslexia. So I was like, no, we're not doing this anymore. So we took her out of the SPED program, and I got her an Orton-Gillingham Explode the Code, and we did that at home, and that's how she learned to read. We also really focus on accommodation and accessibility. So lots of audiobooks, lots of talk to text, lots of accessible software for her, and also for my third child who also has dyslexia but not quite as profound. Same thing, lots of audiobooks, lots of talk to text. And what we found so far in college is that for both of them, 21 and 17, the universities are really, really good at allowing accessible technology. They can use software that helps dictate notes for them. They have a program called Natural Reader. So if they have a textbook, a digital copy of a textbook, it will scan it and it will read it out loud to you. And that just helps level the playing field a little bit. It's not that they can't read their textbooks, it's that they're much slower and more prone to errors. Oh, I'm sorry, I got an alarm going off. Let me see what that's about. Okay. And so it helps them be able to get their reading done in the same period of time as somebody who doesn't struggle with that learning disability. Being able to have audiobooks, being able to have Natural Reader really, really improves their educational experience, and it helps them when they come to get an assessment, like an exam or paper, what have you. It helps them be assessed for mastery of the subject so that their disability is not an impediment to accurate assessment of their mastery of the subject, if that makes sense. In Massachusetts, as a homeschool mom, I have to have my son evaluated every other year. I bought a special ed book. Yeah, in Oregon, it's just 3 times. It's just 5th, 8th, and 11th grade, and then just take a standardized test. We have very, very loose homeschooling laws here, which makes it much easier, I think, for educational neglect to happen, especially some of the spaces we've been in. We've been witness to quite a bit of educational neglect. Particularly kind of fundy homeschoolers with very anti-science. They're using curricula. It's like a Becca, science textbooks that say shit like species aren't mutable. And they'll be like, oh, what about dogs? And then, lots of Christian science textbooks that really are denying kids good science education. I guess I should clarify here for people who don't know me or know our family. Our educational philosophy is entirely secular. Most unschoolers are secular. There are people who are participants in some form of faith who do unschool their kids, but it is not a religious form of education at all. In fact, it tends to lean very anti-authoritarian, anti-establishment, anti-institution. So you can see how that often doesn't mesh very well with religion. I have like 5 or 7 more minutes I can stay on here. At 5 o'clock Pacific time, I'm going to do a live on my main account. I got asked to discuss the 12 principles of permaculture more, so I'm going to do that in a live. I'm going to try and do some themes. So I'll be over there about 5 o'clock p.m. In terms of unschooling for my kids, like, did it prepare them for college? I think so. Again, I think the biggest hurdle for my kids is that they have a very low threshold for bullshit, right? Like, why do we have this arbitrary rule? Why is it that you don't allow late work? One of my kids, my third kid, his first term of community college, he took ASL. By the way, if you're kids are dyslexic, ASL is a really good option if they struggle with written language to get that foreign language requirement. So he was taking ASL, really enjoying it, but really struggling in some components of it due to some other disabilities that he has. I think he's spoken pretty publicly about them before. He has a fine motor impairment, so that can make his ability to articulate signs really precisely difficult. So he was supposed to get accommodations in his class. And he had a really frustrating time with his professor, who seemed very unwilling to accommodate for other disabilities that were not deafness. Very intolerant of other disabilities. And likewise, we got COVID in early October of his freshman year, and he was just sick as a dog. And his professor was like, I don't give a shit, no late homework, none. I don't care if you're sick. I have no exceptions. And what's the point of that rule, right? So I think my kids get much more irate over arbitrary rules that have complete rigidity and no flexibility and don't help the children and their educational experience, right? And I would say that's the number one hindrance for them, is that they struggle to tolerate bullshit, and they struggle to tolerate hierarchical authoritarian structures in formal education, in institutional settings. Yeah. My oldest 20 is a professional animator, unschooled. Awesome. Ruth is about to be a 5th year fish and wildlife major. It is going to take 5 years just because of the structure of the program, and also because she completed her minor in German. B is a junior poli-sci and pre-law major. My kids all have straight A's. Ruth, I think got 1 B+ in one class. But other than that, straight A's. They all got their associate's degree. Well, Hal's about to get his associate's degree, 4.0 GPAs. No formal education. And I think that Ruth said earlier in the live, the fact that they're really good about being self-directed and they don't have to be spoon-fed information gave them a leg up in college, where it's very rapid fire and there's not as much guidance and hand-holding from the professor or the lecturer. So Hal's going to graduate early, I believe. I think at the end of this winter term, he'll have his high school honors diploma and he'll have his associate's degree. And then we'll see what he's doing after that. He's applied to some colleges. So yeah, I think my kids and most unschooled kids that we know, most of their peers, their friends, also very self-directed. They know what they want. They have a passion. They chase it. They get the degree that's meaningful to them. They have, pretty functional adults, I would say, compared to a lot of their peers. And Ruth really, one of the things she talked about a lot early on, the first couple of years in college, was just the huge gaps in the knowledge of her public school classmates. That once they got to college, there were huge subjects huge gaps in their understanding, because they were only taught what was in the formal curriculum and they didn't have time to explore those subjects in more depth. I got a question here. Can you define unschooled, please? Yeah. I said at the beginning of this, and I'm happy to do it however often people need. Unschooling is a very specific educational philosophy versus other forms of homeschooling that use a curriculum. So either they're Waldorf or they're Charlotte Mason or they're like Fundy School of the Dining Room Table. Unschooling does not use a formal curriculum. It is focused on a child's needs and interests, and it is very much children leading the way and parents are facilitating. So the only circumstances under which your kid is unschooled and they use a formal curriculum is if they want it. That's the reason that my 14-year-old is going to college this year, because he wanted to do that. So he's doing an early college program like his 17-year-old brother did at 15. So we respect children's autonomy. We want to preserve and enhance their love of learning, and we don't want to crush their love of learning, right? I think for me, I went through a period where I didn't read all that much because I spent so much time in high school and college doing gifted and talented program and AP and shit like that, where you're just assigned all of these books that are classics. You don't enjoy reading them. You don't want to read them. And reading becomes a chore. It becomes an assignment. It becomes a means to the end, which is getting an A in the class. And it took me a while to rekindle my love of reading just for the sake of reading, because I want to learn about a subject, because I enjoy a story. And my kids have never had that. They don't have to read because it's foisted on them. They read what they want to read because it's interesting to them. And so they haven't had the same kind of struggles that I've had because they've not been education has not been turned into a chore for them, if that makes sense. It's not been turned into an obligation. It's just an organic part of their life. Everything is an opportunity for learning. Everything is a chance to say, okay, like I'm really into ancient Egypt right now. Okay, what are all the ways I can explore this subject? And we as parents want to facilitate for our kids, making sure that they cover all of the kind of academic subjects that they need, get all of the good educational foundation through their passion. So I don't want to lie, it is more work for parents who do it well. It's more work. How do you handle when kids don't have an interest or drive to learn something? You just wait. You wait until they have an interest. I think also, if there's a subject that they really need to learn, if you can contextualize it, even if they aren't really excited about it, then I think they can be willing to learn it. Let me give you an example. Ruth is a fish and wildlife major. Okay, she had to take calculus, multiple classes of calculus. Did she want to learn calculus? Did she enjoy it? No, but it's helping our kids see what's the eyes on the prize. Okay, I want to get here. Sometimes there are hoops I have to jump through, games I have to play to get where I want to go. And so for some subject matters, it's like that. What about things like upper level math? Yeah, the first formal math class Ruth ever took was calculus. So she did a math assessment. She took the GED. So she did study for the GED. So you can say like there was a little formal prep there. She took a math assessment and it immediately placed her into calculus. So that's the first thing that she took. If we had to do it over again, we would have her take a more simple math class first so that she could learn how to do math in a formal setting with formal assessments and that kind of homework and the way homework is evaluated. I would also say here, my husband is a math special education teacher. So we are a very math oriented family. There's math in everything that we do. And so again, it's very much incorporated into our real life so that when kids come to a place where they have to do it for a course in a formal institutional setting, a lot of that foundation is already laid. And that's what I mean when I say that unschooling can be a lot more work. You have to be very intentional as a parent. You can't just be like, bye, peace out, go do whatever you want. I also have to say too, there are unschooled kids whose parents do that. They're kind of checked out, and children will learn on their own when it's important to them, when it's meaningful to them, when it's getting them where they want to go, or because they suddenly have an interest. So I was saying, Allison, earlier, my youngest kid taught himself multiplication in like 2 or 3 days when he was 5 because he suddenly wanted to learn about it, because he wanted to understand multiplication better to play Minecraft. So if there's a way that kids can contextualize it, if there's a way that children need that skill or need to gain that understanding to do something that's meaningful to them, they'll do it. They'll seek it out. And especially if you're unschooled and you have a good relationship with your kids, they'll come to you and be like, I want to learn how to do this thing, but I don't know where to go. Our job as a parent is to help direct them. Okay, well, here's some resources for you, or how would you go about beginning to look for answers to these questions that you have. So for our family, upper level math has not really been a huge issue. All 3 of my older kids have all taken college statistics, no problem. Advanced college statistics, no problem. Straight A's and all of those. But they have been supported by a family that has been really kind of steeped in math the whole time. Yeah. So it might be different. It might be different for different families. But maybe not, because like none of our family had any interest in anything legal, nothing at all. But my eldest kid could talk circles around everybody. By the time she was 15, she could cite Supreme Court case law to you. She could talk through all kinds of constitutional and legal issues because she was passionate about it and decided to learn about it. So it doesn't always require that the parents have knowledge or understanding in a subject matter in order for the kids to go become proficient, right? Yeah. I think I'm going to take 4 more minutes. I'm going to dip out of here and I'm going to be on a live on my main account at 5 p.m. and do that for probably an hour. So I'm happy to talk more about unschooling. I think it's so counterintuitive for those of us that were raised in the US and have the Prussian model of education as our example. We can't conceive of the fact that that model is only a couple hundred years old. Kids in the United States have not always learned the way that they learn now. The model that we use is really very experimental, and it's not really in alignment with how children learn. It's much more in alignment with producing compliant workers for the Industrial Revolution initially and for the machine, right? It's all about crafting good, compliant, obedient citizens. The Prussian industrial model. That's why we have bells and kids go from class to class on the bells. That's why you have to ask permission to use the bathroom. Everybody eats at a set time of day. Everybody is broken into these age stratified groups. Why we have subjects that are discrete and separate from each other. And so I think it's hard if we were raised in that system to think that learning doesn't have to be that way, that we could totally turn it on its head. And maybe I'll talk about this in a future live. There is a really thriving Black and Indigenous unschooled community, and their focus is very much on unschooling as decolonizing education. And I could go down that rabbit hole. It's extremely fascinating to see the way that people on the internet perceive unschooling as this kind of like privileged thing that white people do, but that's not actually the reality of who does unschooling. And I want to add another layer to it here. Penelope Ann said, I imagine unschooling would be helpful for neurodivergence. Yeah, Ruth is autistic, and in our community, Portland is a very white city, but our community has more non-white families than is representative of the greater population, but also a huge amount of kids with learning disabilities, a huge amount of neurodivergent kids who were struggling and being bullied in the public school, not getting their educational needs supported. Likewise, if you look nationwide, an awful lot of unschooled kids are queer, especially in parts of the country where it's not really safe. It's not really safe to be a kid who is out and like be in the public school. And so a lot of kids who don't fit well in this narrow range of what we think children should be and how they learn, a lot of those kids turn to unschooling. Yeah. So thank you everybody for coming to this live. I'm happy to talk about unschooling more. We've done it for, Ruth is 23. So we've been doing it for 18 years. I have a lot of experience. And unschooling is very different than regular homeschooling. It's very different than religious homeschooling. And also it doesn't have to be incompatible with supporting kids in the public school. So maybe I'll talk about that more next time. But thank you. Thanks everybody for showing up. I'll see you in 15 minutes on my main.